Yeah.
All right, and we're back, getting ready for our third of the 4 qualifying rounds for live shader coding at Solskogen 2020. This time we have blackle versus wrighter. Again, as far as I know, two awesome coders who have both participated in this kind of competition before. So we'll definitely look forward to that. And I think they're already ready. So, I mean, as soon as we can start, yep, they are ready. So let's just get into it. So it looks like wrighter has probably a stream test added E, which is helpful. And I think blackle, she added hello world over main. So basically, again, the same shader, just with a comment to test the streaming setup. And you can see here, especially this FFT texture can be really flashy, especially with certain kinds of music. So that's usually why people just get rid of it. I think it's useful to have something to start out with, and I think this texture has been the same one that basically everyone has started out with for the last half a decade, or at least.
The which texture?
Oh, sorry, this effect. I mean,
right,
this initial effect. Yeah, we're seeing some basic setup stuff. Again, wrighter, like I'll commentate, is defining some basic stuff, like T for time, pi. Doing a rotation matrix. Looks like 2D. Should be this 2x2 matrix. Kind of interesting to do it as a define like that rather than a function. Maybe it's easier to type or faster to type. Doesn't really matter.
It's a definition of pi with the arccos -1. What's the deal with that?
It's then you don't have to remember the digits. It's the same mathematical identity.
Oh right.
I think it's the cosine of pi. Or the cosine of -1, no, sorry. Why am I struggling with this? Because cosine of 0 is 1. And then going around the circle, cosine of -1, or cosine of pi is -1.
Right.
And since you want pi, you can take the arccosine of -1 and you'll get pi.
Yeah, that's a neat
radians. Yeah, so it's just one of those mathematical identities that's really useful in this context that you don't have to worry about only memorizing 8 digits of pi.
Yeah, that's very neat.
So then it's even funnier that Blueberry in the last round actually wrote out tau, the 2 pi constant, because there's definitely some shortcuts.
For,
yeah, I think that's funny. Both of these contestants look like they're setting up ray marching loops. So you can see some basic definition of some like camera setup, and then initial vector where the ray starts, and then the ray shoots into the scene, and we have the basic scene is usually a sphere for the test scene. But already, very, very quickly from blackle, we see that she's got a sphere with normals, it looks like. So this is a very, very quick, probably one of the faster setups I think I've seen. And looks like doing some kind of rim lighting. That could look interesting.
What do you call it?
Rim lighting, I called it.
Rim lighting.
Yeah. Very common in especially like Nintendo games.
Right.
Where they'll add like this shape around the edge of the object.
Right.
Tends to cause a lot of aliasing, but in this kind of compo, that really doesn't matter. Like around the edges of the objects, because it makes them stand out more.
Yeah.
This is one of those contexts where the overall impression matters a lot more than those kind of rendering details. So, good technique. And I think both of them now are working on improving their test scenes. Writer's actually got an error, and it's just a white screen, but is still continuing to code anyway. So I think we'll see that progress a little more over time. Yeah. I don't really know what this loop is. It's probably going to be some repeating or like fractal kind of structure. That's part of a scene definition, but really all we can see is there's some, it looks like there's some rotation each iteration, so it's probably some kind of fractal-like thing with just some crazy math.
Yeah.
Usually these things, like there's kind of an idea of how you put these mathematical things together, but the actual numbers you get are usually pretty random or pretty like to taste. So you never know what it's going to look like until it's all put together.
Yeah. Then I guess you can just start tweaking the constants that you use,
Yes,
and then
exactly.
get different results.
Exactly. Sometimes wildly different. So if you pick the right things, you can make them look very different from a few tweaks. And that can be used to your advantage to make things work over time, or just to even go through, cycle a few different ideas very quickly, which are both really, really good things to do in this kind of compo.
Oh.
All right, here we go. So blackle suddenly getting much more complex geometry. Looks like there's this comp, which maybe means components, and this kind of rotation, and looks like putting a lot of these together. Again, with a bunch of constants, that makes this look fairly random, which is kind of cool. I think it looks really a lot of variation in whatever this geometry actually is.
Yeah, definitely.
It also seems to have made this like a lot of these sort of flat surfaces, and I don't know if we're seeing that as an artifact of how the normals are calculated, or if it actually is a lot of different flat surfaces. Definitely going to be a cool look. I look forward to when there's more proper lighting added to the scene, and we can see more of that geometric detail come out.
Yeah.
Looks like this init is the initial position, so it looks like she's going to try and make the camera move to the right, or whatever way we're looking. Yeah. So there's just some constant motion now. And going to tweak the speed of that motion, which also affects like where it starts, because it's just multiplying time. So
Yeah.
that's why the camera jumps around a bit, but I think the speed is really what we're tweaking here. And some rotation, so that works. Writer, still a white screen. We're seeing what's looking like it's going to be some kind of repetitive fractal-like geometry, but we don't know what it's going to look like until we see it. So that'll be exciting.
Yeah. It's something I like about watching these is how quickly it can change.
Yes.
So just as soon as you hit save, then you get something completely different.
Absolutely.
I guess they've been working towards longer than we've been able to.
Yeah, and it's really cool because sometimes you'll have people that are really good at, for example, memorizing something and executing it, or memorizing like the main gist of an idea and then executing it and allowing all the endorphins and everything to kind of just mess with your brain and see, and like make these small tweaks. So I don't know. I think it's really cool. And definitely that balance is actually something that really varies a lot between competitors. Like how much do you prepare versus how much do you do live? And all of them are definitely valid approaches, but I really like to see the difference between competitors.
Yeah.
But here it is especially interesting because it's always a risk when you want to do like hide something for a long time or not show it, because then by the time you get everything in place, you've missed all these potential debugging opportunities where you get something halfway done on screen. And I don't know if we've seen that on purpose from these competitors here, but it looks like blackle has taken this very iterative approach to get something working and then tweak it.
Yeah.
Whereas writer seems to be going for a particular thing and then showing it all at once. Again, I'm not entirely sure that's what has actually happened, but it might be the case. And now, since we don't see anything, but we also don't see a shader error on writer's side, I'm wondering if something went wrong.
Yeah. So you think maybe they're trying to find the bug?
I think that might be the case. But it's hard to say.
Yeah.
That would be my guess, though. Just kind of tweaking some things and hoping something comes out that they can then bring out.
Well, some color here.
Yeah, blackle seems to have started on more proper lighting. I actually quite liked the colorful version more than I thought I did after I saw this. But this is surely some in-between thing. We're either going to see more complex lighting or better coloring or something. So.
Oh.
All right, so it looks like some kind of edge detection, like Sobel kind of filter in 3D maybe even. So that's actually quite cool.
It's more cartoony.
Yeah, that's a very cool texture. One that I wouldn't have thought of, so I think that's really, really cool to see. And it also fits the geometry really well, so I think that's really smart. Anytime you can come up with a trick like this where you're kind of using the geometry to texture it in a way that doesn't necessarily make sense in like a physical sense, but somehow fits together, I think is really good. And now we finally see some geometry on writer's side. And maybe the white screen was actually a temporary view of this.
Yeah.
It's just we were like in the geometry because it looks like the rays are kind of being allowed to go through the geometry, which is something that we've seen from writer in previous competitions, I think.
Oh. This is getting a bit interesting.
Oh wow, yeah, these look very, very similar.
Yeah.
I wonder if they're aware, like they're fully allowed to watch the stream while this is happening. And like what am I trying to say? The live version of that, if they were here in person, is that they can just look up at the screen. So there's no, we're not stopping them from doing that. So I have no idea if this is intentional. It probably isn't. So it's really cool to see how similar they look.
Yeah.
But I think they're very different approaches. Blackle seems to be doing a texture based on like this edge section, which gives you just black and white stuff, whereas wrighter seems to be accumulating ray stuff as it goes through the geometry. And again, you get this black and white look with a lot of lines in it, but I think it's very different approaches.
Yeah. So
Now,
do they have access to any actual geometry, or is it all?
It's all procedural.
Procedural.
It's all procedural. So the only thing they have access to are those textures and normal shader inputs, like the position of the pixel.
Right.
And that's it. Everything else is done by using implicit geometry, where you define, for example, a sphere is or an object is the distance. If you take a point in space, you can take the distance to the surface of an object, right? So
yeah,
it's just that, which gets pretty crazy. So you can see you can do like spatial repetitions. So like blackle has added a single cylinder, but then with some spatial repetitions has made it go on forever.
Yeah.
And then you can of course mix that with some kind of like spatial distortions to make those shapes even more complex. So it's a very powerful technique, especially very popular with size coding because it's so flexible.
Yeah.
And wrighter is doing some kind of geometric distortion. Also seems to have added some kind of cylinders or something, but then with more complex distortions, I think.
Are they allowed to change the resolution if they want to make more complex stuff?
Right, like the pixel resolution.
Yeah.
So yes and no. Actually, like when they're competing in a live, live setting is not the right one, but in an in-person setting, I think they can actually change the resolution. But they wouldn't do that dynamically, right? They would do it starting out.
Right.
But in this setup, actually, the way that this editor works is it's actually sending the shader code to us. So we're actually running these shaders locally.
Okay.
With their code that's being set and updated to us. So we get like editor change events and cursor move events that we update locally. So in that sense, no, they don't control the resolution because that's up to us and how we've set up the stream.
Right.
It looks like blackle has changed the radius of these cylinders based on the FFT. So you can see that kind of spectrum view across there, and is playing with different ways to use that. One of the things with this kind of ray marching technique is if you change, for example, the radius of a shape really quickly in a way that kind of doesn't make sense. If you're tracing along a ray, you end up with some discontinuities. So that I think explained that noise that we saw earlier. So then it looked like she changed to using that for some kind of coloring instead, which is probably a safer choice.
Right.
Maybe it's actually a bit of both, which is even better because then you get the geometric effect as well as hiding the artifacts with this kind of glow.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really cool approach. Wrighter seems to be adding some like more subtle changes, some kind of distortions to the effect. And I have not been watching the time at all because I've just been looking at the shaders and engaged in that. But it looks like we just passed the 2-minute mark. So just incredible work in just 13 minutes from both systems.
They both have pretty interesting effects already.
Definitely. And is it just me, or is blackle also distorting the outermost geometry now? I think we're seeing some
looks like
movement
something
there, which is very cool. Again, I think that's one of those cases we talked about earlier, where once you have some random constants in place, then later you can start changing them.
Yeah. Oh, I like this color. That's
yeah, that was a really nice touch. This kind of look really reminds me of like early to mid 2000s, like just everything's kind of clear plastic.
Right.
That kind of look.
Totally.
And I think that's really cool. I have a feeling that look is going to be coming back really hard in a couple years.
Yeah.
Like in a lot of visual art in general in the world.
Yeah, Apple monitor and stuff.
Yes, exactly. This colored IMAX was so cool. Again, coming up on the just 45-second mark. So we're just seeing more and more tweaks. Both of these scenes actually look somewhat polished and finished. Blackle playing with glow in more places, and Writer seems to be bringing out the colors and doing more tweaks. I like especially too how Blackle has added camera movement.
Yeah.
It looks like there's several different angles that it kind of switches between, which usually the way you would achieve that is you would make kind of one camera motion that has a lot of change over time, and then you would change time such that it jumps around within that motion, and that's a really good technique to get a lot of angles really cheap. And actually, we are done. Sorry, I missed the countdown, but that's the end of the round. 15 minutes went by so fast. Both, again, two amazing shaders.
Yeah, very impressive.
So again, thanks to live voting, we have the results are in, and they're a bit more close this time. We have Writer with 22 points and Blackle with 35 points. So Blackle's the winner. Give a hand to her. And again, two great shaders. I actually want to look at these again. Can we see Writer's shader? Very cool, plasticky gel kind of thing.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And then Blackle's again was this really cool thing with sort of two very different kinds of geometry.
Yeah. I like how you can see the beats of the music in the columns.
Definitely, and a lot of
nice
cool
touch,
morphing.
and yeah, both very cool.
Yeah. All right, well done to both contestants. This is really, really cool. We're really happy with obviously the quality of these shaders. It's always amazing to see what people can do. So that was our third qualifier. We've got one more, and the next one will be. I actually have to double check. Sorry about that. The next one will be Provod versus Rody. So we're gonna go and get that set up, and then we'll be back in a minute.